Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm Sammy, your host, and thank you so much for joining me. Now, today we're going to talk about Pinterest. Now, wait, before you say, I don't need to listen to this one, I don't need to do Pinterest, Pinterest can't work for nonprofits, all the things, it's just another social media platform, I challenge you to listen to this episode. I'm joined by somebody that I've known in the business world for a very long time, Cara Chace, who's a Pinterest expert. And we're talking about kind of all of the top level things to consider when it comes to Pinterest and how you can maximize it and why it can be a really awesome long-term strategy. And also why it can allow you to take the same content you've already created and repurpose it over and over and over and over again. So it can help get you off the content wheel, and it will also work nicely and in conjunction with your Google Ad Grant, if that's something that your organization is running. If you don't know about the Google Ad Grant, don't worry. We have an episode about that with Grant Hensel from Nonprofit Megaphone. I'll link that up in the show notes at thefirstclick.net/podcast. Cara Chace is the creator of Pin Power Method, a Pinterest marketing membership designed for online entrepreneurs. She started in social media in 2011 by managing 13 million fans across 17 social media accounts for a worldwide band. Since then, she's gone on to discover what makes a fantastic digital marketing strategy for online entrepreneurs by teaching how Pinterest fits into that strategy and creating lots of light bulb moments. She loves nothing more than helping fellow business owners, except maybe a good book and one more cup of coffee. So yes, definitely something she works on is Pinterest for online entrepreneurs. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, we're not online entrepreneurs, but you are. So when you're working and getting into the online space, getting more visibility for your organization, trying to diversify your donors and reaching out to your ideal donors, Pinterest is a great strategy for that and can be a really great tool in your toolbox. So I'm not saying this is something you have to add right now if you don't have time for it, but I definitely want you to listen to this episode so that it can marinate in your brain. Or if you've been thinking about adding Pinterest, I think you're going to get some great tools, some great feedback, and some great ideas for how to make this happen. Okay? But before we get into this episode, it is brought to you by our guide, 9 Ways to Raise More Money Online. And this is just some ideas, again, to get you into that online space, get you thinking about how you might continue to raise more money, diversify, get more people in your donor journey, and just get people interacting with you so that you can reach out to them and solicit those monthly gifts or walk them up into larger donors. Okay? So you can get that guide by going to thefirstclick.net/fundraise. I hope you'll download it. It's totally free. And let me know, which one are you thinking that you might start with first, or which ones are you already doing that are having success for you? I'd love to hear. So again, that's thefirstclick.net/fundraise. But for now, let's get into the episode. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern, and each week I bring you tips from myself and other experts, as well as hot seats with small business owners and entrepreneurs to demystify digital marketing and get you on your way to generating more leads and growing your business. Well, hey there, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Cara Chace to the podcast. Cara, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to chat.
Yeah, we have been in the same circles and kind of known each other for several years now. And I'm getting you on the podcast is something I've wanted for a long time. So I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah, we have been in the same circles. So I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Yeah. Okay. So we are here to talk about Pinterest today. And so before we kind of jump into some tactical actions and why nonprofits might want to think about Pinterest, why is Pinterest your go-to tool of choice?
Yeah, great question. So when we first met each other, I believe I was still doing all social media and digital marketing. Mm-hmm. So I used to do all the social platforms, at least the ones that existed 5 years ago.
No TikTok.
Right. No TikTok, no Clubhouse. And I built websites and did email marketing and blogging and just kind of everything under the digital marketing umbrella. And what I realized after 2 years in business, when I actually looked at my analytics and stepped into that CEO role of, okay, what am I doing and what returns am I getting for what I'm doing with marketing? Pinterest was driving an insane amount of my traffic, my opt-ins, my leads, everything. It was somewhere around 80% of my traffic was coming from Pinterest. And that was definitely one of those aha moments that we kind of all dream about, where it's like, wow, I need to pay attention to this. And so I started digging in and really educating myself and understanding how Pinterest worked and what was working for me and why it was just performing like nothing else performed, and made the decision to niche into Pinterest in 2017.
Wow.
That's how long ago it's been. And it has been the best thing for my business and my clients. So yeah, I chose to focus on Pinterest because I saw the results that it got me and my clients. And so I just went all in.
Well, I want to call out one thing that you said is you looked at the data and you realized what was working really well, and you doubled down on this instead of trying to do all of the things because everybody says to do all of the things.
Right. And what I noticed in my business was I was working on an agency model where I had one-to-one clients that I was providing services for on a monthly retainer basis. And because I was doing everything, it was so hard, the busier I got, to keep up on all the changes. And as we know, social media and digital marketing has evolved exponentially just in the last 5 or 6 years. So I felt like I didn't know enough about each platform to do it successfully for every client that wanted it. So it was kind of this like jack of all trades, master of none at some point in my business. Because I was doing so well, I got so busy, it's kind of that catch-22. So the nice thing is that I didn't have to dig very far. It was so obvious.
I love it when that happens.
Yes. So then it just became educating and going all in.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that you were doing all the social media platforms, but I know that you have a very strong feeling about how Pinterest is not a social media platform. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of what the differences are there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a super common misperception that social media is included with, or Pinterest is included with social media. And even Google Analytics kind of lumps it under their social media stats, right? But the fact of the matter is social media, those are content and engagement platforms. What Pinterest is a visual search engine. So it has far more in common with Google or YouTube than it does with Instagram or Facebook. And the reason it's a search engine is because it functions on keywords. So whereas Instagram has hashtags and algorithms based on engagement and conversation and all of that kind of stuff, and we know Facebook has gone way off the deep end of algorithms and all of that kind of stuff, right? The reason Pinterest works so well is, number one, it functions on keywords like any search engine to show you the content that matches what you're searching for and the problems you're trying to solve. But it's also one of the only platforms that's designed to get people to click through to your website. Yeah. So like Instagram, you have your one little link in your profile. Facebook, if you try and put up content where it links off of Facebook, they'll suppress that reach. A lot of these platforms want you to stay in their little bubble of their website and their platform. Pinterest is actually designed to get people to click through to your content on your website. So
and that totally is different. A game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about, the other thing is social media, the content that you put up tends to not last very long. There's a very short lifespan for that content because of, tens of millions of users and algorithms and all that kind of stuff. So, like a tweet lasts 18 minutes, right. I think is the latest thing, Facebook post, Instagram post, maybe 24 hours. And it's not that content isn't still there. It's that the algorithm kind of stops showing it as something new and interesting to your followers. With Pinterest, the content actually snowballs and is evergreen and continues to build over time. And the reason I know this is because I have a blog that I wrote in 2015 that is still one of my top traffic drivers to my website today from Pinterest.
Because of the pins that that you already had out there, but also because of new pins that you can consistently create for that content that's older.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get into some of that stuff in a second for sure. Cause that's like the gold of, I love it. Like just being able to, I learned from you. So, hopefully I'm not going to say something where you're like, oh my gosh, I taught you nothing, but, what the social piece of Pinterest to me is not in the engagement, one-on-one direct engagement, but in providing like a community of saying like, hey, you came here because you wanted to learn about this, but here's a ton of other resources, mine or other people's, that I think would benefit you in your learning, in your growth, in your whatever. I feel like that's kind of the unique community and social piece, even though it's not direct with Pinterest.
Right. So what other social platforms would term as engagement is not what happens on Pinterest. So Instagram or YouTube, whatever, you're going to have that whole like, share, follow, hearts, whatever. With Pinterest, what happens is people engage with your content and they give you signals that they're interested or not, such as saving a pin to their own board or clicking through to your website or sharing it to a group board or, something like that. But what it is actually giving that content some legs to it instead of just hearting it or, whatever it is. So you're right. Pinterest is where you can curate the most valuable information for your audience because, again, people are coming to Pinterest searching for answers to questions or problems. They want ideas and inspiration for how to do something better, how to be better, how to learn something. It's a very inspiring platform. So if you're able to draw people in with providing quality content or information that matches what they're looking for, it's almost like you've provided them with a gold mine that they can get lost in of your content and your information or other things that you think are valuable to them.
Yeah. And that's just building your know, like, trust factor with your audience.
Exactly.
Okay. So this might make sense, for people who are probably thinking, okay, well, if I'm a food blogger or if I'm a fashion person, like Pinterest is great, but as a nonprofit, and I know you get this all the time, but let's just say for the nonprofit world, like why might they want to be on Pinterest and what types of things might they want to be sharing?
Right. So that's another really common misperception is that Pinterest is only for like wedding professionals and recipe bloggers, right?
DIYers.
Right. All the DIY stuff, how to make a birdhouse in, 5 steps. But I am here to tell you that Pinterest can be used effectively by anyone with a website. So the whole point of Pinterest, again, is to drive traffic from a piece of content you put up, which is your pin, back to your website. So you are not limited to blogging or like a Shopify store or anything like that. Any page on your website that you want to drive traffic to, you can put up a pin for. So if you're a nonprofit, chances are you probably have some blogs. You probably have an About Us section. You might have gone as far as having information, downloads, resources, whatever it is. The key thing, because nonprofits are not a huge industry on Pinterest, you're going to have to be really intentional about thinking about your target audience and what they're searching for in order to really take advantage of the amount of traffic that's on Pinterest. Do you want me to expand on that? Because that could be I could lose people there.
But one thing I want to say, and then yes, absolutely expand on this, but one thing I want to make sure to trigger for people is, you guys have access to the Google Ad Grant for free, which is a $10,000 grant that allows you to run Google Ads back to your website. And so as you're working through that campaign and the keywords that you're doing there, Pinterest is a great place to duplicate those efforts and still drive a ton of traffic organically on Pinterest to those same pages. So same content that you're creating, you can utilize in multiple platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't work harder than you need to,
Yes.
right? So I want to talk a little bit about finding your keywords. And it's so great that you mentioned that, because this is going to dovetail a little bit with how I want to expand on that concept. When you're looking for your keywords on Pinterest, you really have to walk way back in your customer journey or your audience journey to when they first realize they might have a problem that they want to solve or something that they want more information about. My best example of this is one of my members who's a business coach. She could not figure out her keywords on Pinterest, and she kept getting stuck and going, there's no business coach keywords on Pinterest. And the mindset shift that we had to have was they're not coming to Pinterest to hire a business coach.
Right.
They're not there yet. Pinterest is so early on in that awareness journey. You have to think 5, 6, 7 steps back. Maybe they start with, how do I be more productive? How do I plan my day better? How do I, what are like the best entrepreneur tips for working at home? All these things where they have first identified that they want to do something better or they need to solve a problem for themselves, where you provide them with a great opt-in or a great blog or, whatever it is. And they get in your world, hopefully get on your email list. And 6 months later, they realize you're the business coach for them because you're helping them step by step solve these problems way back in the customer journey.
Yeah. So one example might be like, let's say you're an environmental company trying to get people to have zero trash or whatever, net zero trash.
Zero waste.
Right? Yes. So maybe your Pinterest page has articles that you've done on how you can implement that in your home, and other articles for people to know, in different geographical areas that they might be in that might have different situations. And they just keep seeing you pop up with several articles. They visit your website a few times. They learn a lot from you. And they're like, oh my gosh, we have changed our household. We want to continue to support you and dive deeper. So now we're going to become donors, or we're going to become volunteers.
That's exactly it. That is a perfect outline of an example of how nonprofits could take advantage of this. And by the way, zero waste is huge on Pinterest.
There you go. Didn't even know that.
Right? So this is an example of somebody's not coming to Pinterest to look for a nonprofit to donate to.
Right.
They are looking for how to make a difference in their life, their home, their family, their community, whether that is pet adoption or zero waste or, trying to have more non-toxic items in their home.
Well, we work with the school and they were talking about getting on Pinterest with all the homeschooling to provide activities for kids that were in their enrollment category that they were going to be enrolling for in the fall. So activities that parents can do at home to keep their kids busy and educational. So yeah, the sky's the limit.
The sky is the limit. So, but don't think about how do I get somebody to want to donate to my organization. It's where does somebody feel like they want to make a difference that's aligned with our organization. So one of the key things that I want to make sure we don't miss, in particular for nonprofits, is with Pinterest, because it is worldwide. If you are a nonprofit that is very specific location based, say you're an adoption agency for animals or something like that is location specific, remember that is also a keyword, and you need to be putting your location in your content all over Pinterest as well.
That's such a good point. So, Cara, when we think about keywords for Pinterest, is it similar to when we think about keywords in Google, and that we kind of want to think about what's the question they're asking and then go from there?
Yes. So there's a little bit of a difference that I've noticed in Pinterest and Google in just kind of how people type in their keyword search phrases. And I don't know if that's just because the platforms are different. I have a feeling it's a very similar audience as far as sometimes I use Google, sometimes I use Pinterest, but there are a few keywords that come up on Pinterest over and over that are really useful for tying into your specific keywords, such as how to, Anything with the word ideas in it. Listicles do really well. So like 5 tips for, that kind of stuff. Not that you want to have that specific thing for your keyword search, but tips, ideas, how to, inspiration. There's all sorts of key phrases like that you can tack onto your long tail keyword phrases that seem to be more prevalent on Pinterest. My impression has been on Google, people tend to shorthand their keyword phrases a little bit more than on Pinterest.
Yeah, I think that's true unless you're doing voice search.
Yeah, I would agree.
But that's a really good point in that one of the tools and hacks that we've always said is if you're trying to start, if you have no idea where to start with keywords, go into Google and just type in like one of the main phrases and see what kind of starts to auto-populate. And you can do the same thing in Pinterest and get some ideas about what are some common searches that people are looking for.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is when you do a Google search and you scroll down, at some point down the page, you'll see that related searches function, or like people also search for, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. On Pinterest, they do the same thing, but visually. So if you type in like Pinterest marketing tips, and you scroll down the page, you'll see blocks, and they're visual. Again, it's not text like Google, but it will give you related search terms relating to Pinterest marketing tips. So that's a really useful one as well.
Yeah, and a way to work smarter and not have to like try to rack your brain on like, what are all the things? Okay, So before we get into the Pinterest website connection, because I do want to make sure, because that's a critical piece to success. When we talk with organizations about what platforms they choose to be on and where they're spending their time, the audience for Pinterest, I know, has been growing, but kind of what does that look like right now?
As far as numbers?
As far as like who's using the platform, like who's engaging on it, like what are there any industries or types of audiences that maybe Pinterest wouldn't work for?
Yeah, so I would say the segment that they've been able to track the best for purchasing power is millennials. Millennials have a huge presence on Pinterest, and they typically start their buying decision journey on Pinterest.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's still a platform that heavily skews female versus male. That doesn't mean that they're not, men audience segments on there, but it definitely skews heavier female. And you're going to find all age ranges on there. Mm-hmm. Teenagers use it for how to start their first, bullet journal or school organization or stuff like that. And older women use it for, everything from quilting to recipes and whatever it is. It's almost hard to say that there isn't anybody that doesn't use Pinterest.
My daughter hijacked my Pinterest account, and all of a sudden I looked at it and I was like, what is going on? Because she was searching for patterns to make clothes on Roblox.
I have no idea.
Whatever. Here we go. I'm aging myself anyway.
Right.
Roblox, but the money is called Robux. Anyway, so she was like, Mom, I need your Pinterest account because I need to look for patterns because I'm designing my own clothing on this game. Right. And people post patterns all over Pinterest, and she's 12. So I hear you. Yeah. And then same, she uses it to, when she's working on her jewelry that she likes to make, she likes to get on there and do it. So
yeah, I'm working with my daughter right now, who's 8, in thinking about her next bedroom and what she'd like it to look like, and some ideas and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, pretty much everybody uses Pinterest, but they've identified millennials as really using it for specifically purchase decisions.
Well, and I will say I was a critic and I was hesitant, and Cara knows this. And I was, I remember, I think I have it ingrained in my brain the day that you yelled at me and you're like, get off Pinterest. Like, you do not need to just be looking at recipes, like get on the other side of it, like start getting involved in the other side. And I got scolded, but it is true. And it was worth it. And, we aren't super active on Pinterest right now, but it is like the key thing for us that we're working on in Q2 is starting to develop that again, because we did see definite impact when we started, and then we just got lazy.
Well, and the thing to understand, and you know this, is that consistency is the name of the game, and it is a long-term strategy. So don't go into Pinterest thinking that it's going to be like Instagram, where you batch your content for a month and then you see these huge spikes in traffic and brand awareness and all of that. It really is so much more like a long-term SEO strategy, because all those keywords you're using in your profile and your pins and your boards and all of that, that is just like a search engine, where it takes the platform time to understand what your content is about and where to show it.
Yes, but I'm all for foundational long-term games, because that is, we're in it for the long term. We're not just here to be like, making money for 6 months and then getting out.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So keywords, definitely something we want to pay attention to. And then you talked a little bit about, if you have a website, then Pinterest is a good strategy for you, but what kinds of things are going to help you up-level your Pinterest game on your website?
Yeah. So I teach Pinterest strategy for online entrepreneurs in terms of like different phases to go through. And phase 1 is optimizing. What that means is making sure every single box is checked so that your profile is set up correctly, both front end and back end. So what that means is, okay, you've done your keyword research and you've got them in your profile and your board descriptions and your pins, and you're doing all that. But on the back end, it's really important to claim or confirm your website with Pinterest. And all that is a little piece of CSS code that you put in the head tag of your website. It's a lot simpler than it sounds.
Yes.
But what it enables Pinterest to do is talk to your website and understand the customer journey between Pinterest and your content on Pinterest and your website. It's just as important as making sure you have Google Analytics set up with your website. Well,
it's the same as a Facebook pixel, right?
It's exactly the same thing. Yes. Yeah, it tracks the customer journey and gives you a whole bunch of Pinterest analytics that you wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. So it's stuff like that. Setting up your conversion tags, which are like pixels. A lot of people don't realize that you can upload custom audiences to Pinterest for retargeting in the future. So you can upload your email lists and your, website visitor information and all of that kind of stuff to set yourself up for retargeting people that are already in your audience, or finding those lookalike audiences that are new people that act like audiences you already have. So
I want to say that is critical for, especially in the nonprofit space, because you usually are going to have at least 2 audiences at a minimum, right? Your donors that you're trying to go after, right, and the people that you are providing, or people, whatever environment, whatever that you're providing services to the community. So that those tags are going to be great at helping you be able to differentiate between who you're sending
your
information
audience
to.
Segments to. Yeah, absolutely. So there's both pieces. Like I said, making sure on the front end and the back end, all those boxes are checked. And what I liken it to is, if you don't take the time to optimize your profile, which actually could take you just a few hours, really, if you're tech savvy already, it's like having your foot on the gas and your car being in neutral. If you don't optimize your profile, you can put up 50 pins a day, but if your website's not connected and you're not tracking your traffic the way you should, and giving Pinterest all the tools that you can give it to optimize your content, then you're going to go nowhere fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we have that done, we've got our pins up and we're like linking to content that we have on our website. Like, what do we need to have in that content?
Yeah. So again, you want to think of it like an SEO strategy. Don't just link to, I see actually wedding professionals make this mistake. They want to link back to just galleries of beautiful weddings without any verbiage whatsoever about what it's about. Well, Pinterest, because it functions like a search engine, it actually reads the quality of the page you're connecting the pin to. So if you have no words on there, nothing for it to say, okay, this makes sense for what the pin says it is, it's going to think that's not quality content. So
do you liken this to like not restaurants, recipes? And I hear this all the time. People are like, when I look at a recipe on Pinterest, I just want to get to the recipe and I have to read this whole life story of the food blogger. I mean, you've heard this, right?
Right. So this is where you need to do things as a business owner that doesn't have to do with Pinterest. It has to do with your content. So like I do the same thing when I'm looking for something on Pinterest and I click through and I'm on my phone in the Pinterest browser. And there's 50 million pop-ups and I can't read the content. I'm like, what are you doing? Right. So if you're a recipe blogger and the same thing where I'm like, how long do I have to scroll before I get to the ingredients? Put a jump link at the top of your blog that says, if you just want to go to the recipe, click here. Like there's simple ways to think about your customer journey, not how do I get them to have to scroll by 50 million ads. They're here for the recipe, right? So you really got to put yourself in your visitor's shoes. But going back to what do you need to have on your website? Like how do you set up your website? All of that. So remember that Pinterest is for any URL, any page that you have on your website. So this could be a landing page for your opt-in or your freebie that you're offering to your community or, whatever it is. This could be blogs. This could be galleries of, maybe past events, but you should at least have some verbiage and SEO value on there besides just pictures. This could be about the story of your nonprofit, how you got started, why you do what you do. One of my favorite things actually to create pins for is my resources page. So I have a resource page on my website with all the tools and sites and apps and everything that I use in my business. For a nonprofit, it would be, what you would think a resources page for a nonprofit would be, like other links and complementary businesses or organizations in their area. You can literally create a pin for any page on your website. It's not just trying to churn out blogs week after week so you have enough content.
Well, and just as an example, so we just recently did some work with this organization in Detroit that provides resources for immigrants and refugees in their community. And so they work with law offices and social service, like all sorts of things. So they have all those resources on one page. So they could create a separate pin for each of those resources, but still all directing people back to that same page.
Yeah. And here's the beauty of Pinterest. And you've heard me say this many times. It's not about creating new content. It's about creating new pins for the content you have. So on Pinterest, the pin itself is the content, not the blog. So as long as you have a fresh pin, which is defined as an image or a video that has not been seen on Pinterest before, then that counts as a fresh pin. So there are approximately a bajillion different templates that you can use for pins out there. You want them to be on brand. You want them to convey your organization and have readable fonts and look good and all of that. But you can create as many pins as you want for the same page, as long as that graphic looks different.
Yeah. So I want to make sure you guys heard this, because this is like the gold in Pinterest is you don't have to create brand new content all the time. So for those of you that are creating like a really long form blog post once a month, like you can create pins for that same blog post over and over and over and over and over again. The critical piece here, I think, and Cara, if you can touch on this as well, is making sure that what you are creating and sharing on Pinterest is part of your sales or donor journey, so that you are driving people back to something that's hyper relevant to where you want them to go next, not just creating it for the sake of creating it.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said that. I have had to say this to both clients and members over and over again, is that Pinterest will get you traffic all day long, but it's your website's job to convert that traffic. So and I work with this with my one-on-one clients as well. We will say, okay, this is a really good blog post to create some pins for this month, but there's no call to action on this post. There's nothing for them to do next. They're just going to read it and bounce right off. So it's making sure that Pinterest is the top of your funnel, but you don't have a leaky bucket when it comes to your sales funnel.
I love that.
Yeah. So when I sit down and I batch once a month, all of our Pinterest content. That's actually phase 2 of what I teach. And I sit down and the first thing I do is look at my Google Analytics and my Pinterest Analytics and see what's performing really well. So if I have a piece of seasonal content that say is about, working less in the summer as an entrepreneur or something like that, and I know that I start getting clicks to that every year around May or so, I know that, okay, this is old content, but I'm going to create 10 new pins for this blog post from 3 years ago. Make sure it's refreshed and updated and has a good call to action. And that's going to be 10 out of my 40 pins for the month. Mm-hmm. And then I might go to Pinterest and see, okay, this pin that I created last month is starting to do really well. So do I want to create a new graphic and use the same title and description? Or maybe I just want to tweak the graphic or the verbiage slightly. How do I want to try and replicate the success of this pin? Typically, somewhere between a third and a half of my pins that go out every month are for new content. Sometimes less. Sometimes I have months where it's like, this is all refreshed, repurposed content.
Because you're looking at the data and paying attention to what the people want to see, not just throwing things out there because you feel like you need to.
Exactly. So I typically only put out a new blog maybe once a month. Sometimes it's like 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what I have going on in my life. But my Pinterest content stays consistent because I can continue to create fresh pins for content that I already know does well and drives traffic.
That's incredible. And I think a game changer for nonprofits that don't have a large team.
Right.
Okay, so there's one more thing I want to touch on because I know we're kind of just doing a top level Pinterest one-on-one or 101 because there's so much we could dive deep. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I do want to touch on the fact that when you're part of your Pinterest strategy is also bringing in content that you don't create. Now, you wouldn't do that on other social platforms, right? You want it to be pretty much all of your own, except for maybe LinkedIn when you share, articles that are relevant to your profession. But why is sharing other people's content on Pinterest good for you and B, an essential part of your strategy?
So I'm so glad you asked this because this has changed.
Oh, okay.
That was best practice from the time Pinterest was in beta in 2011, to up until about 6 months ago. So it used to be, they said, we don't want you just resharing your own content. We don't want people to just see your content every time they click over to your stuff. We want you resharing other people's content because that makes this a better community. And everybody was on board with that. And it was great. Tailwind Queues. Tailwind is a approved third-party Pinterest scheduler that I use. I teach how to use it. I use it with all my clients. And we would have, depending on the client, anywhere from 50-50 of their content and others' content to 80-20, 80% their content, 20% other people's content. Pinterest, not even 6 months ago, there have been huge changes in Pinterest in the last 6 months, right around January, actually. So it's really only been a couple months. They came out and said, we want you creating your own content and we want that to be what you're pinning. And they've completely flip-flopped on it. That does not mean that you shouldn't repin other people's content, particularly if you think it's super valuable and interesting. So the way that I've changed this for myself and my clients is I have a pretty highly vetted group of people that are complementary to my business and my industry, where I just know the content that they put out is really high quality and valuable. And I'm not going to have to worry about their pin going to some spam, like ad heavy, weird website. Right.
Right.
They're just kind of people that I know from having been around a long time. And typically what I'm doing now is I am really only resharing 1 to 2 repins per day. And the rest, anywhere from like 8 to 10 pins per day, is solely my content.
Okay.
So they have flip-flopped on that. And so I'm glad you brought that up.
Nope, that's good to know. I'm learning something today.
Right? I mean, it's the same thing as how people used to teach to pin 50 times a day and just loop the same pins with Board Booster. And that went out the window real quick when Pinterest figured out what was going on.
So what I love about what you just said, though, is you have a group of people that you vetted. So I love to talk about collaboration. So when we think about you have niched down to Pinterest, but that doesn't mean that that's your entire digital marketing strategy. So if you have other people that you trust, that you can then provide that value to your audience to say, okay, I don't teach this, but here's some great information you might want to know about updates to SEO or updates to Facebook or ways to create new graphics, whatever it might be. It's a great way to kind of pull that all together and still provide whole picture support.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best way to illustrate this is when people are creating profiles or they know they just need to totally redo their Pinterest profile or, whatever it is. A lot of people get stuck on their boards. They think, well, I do this one thing. So how many other boards should I have? And what should they be about? And you need to think about it like a Venn diagram of what is your audience interested in that also makes sense with yours? And just like you said, I have boards on general social media marketing. I have boards on email marketing. I have boards on website design. Anything you can think about in the digital space, because if somebody sees me repin or put up content about that, chances are they could also benefit from learning a little bit more about Pinterest marketing, and they could choose to follow me and see my content in their feeds, all that kind of stuff. So it really is that whole, yes, you want your profile to be about you and your business and the value you're providing to your audience, but what else is your audience interested in? So like somebody that sells farmhouse sinks, I have a member who's a Shopify store owner. She does fantastically well. And she sells, literally, that's her niche, farmhouse sinks. But she has boards about interior design. She has boards about kitchen layouts, all those things. So again, it's not about what do I sell? It's where's my customer at in their buying journey, what they're thinking about, what problems they're trying to solve.
Well, and so let's think about one example that just popped into my brain is if you're in the pet adoption, area, you might have, collars and, doggy sweaters and food bowls and things that you recommend people purchase, right? Or dog training things that you don't do yourself, but that you can then also provide value to your sponsors and corporate partners to say, hey, this is the traffic we get on our Pinterest all the time. Like we can build this into your sponsor package as added value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could think of probably 10 things off the top of my head, from like how to have a successful dog or cat adoption, like how to make that successful in your home, how to introduce an animal into your home if you have other pets, behavior training, like you said, like all these things that are going to be questions and concerns for your audience that you can help them with. And yes, like you said, you're going to have stats and numbers and all sorts of stuff to say, this is the value that we provide.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we could talk about this forever. I feel like we've given people we might have to have you back to dive deeper into maybe 1 or 2 separate tactics.
Oh yeah. You know me, I could do this all day long.
You do it all day long.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I mean, if you don't already feel like you should be on Pinterest, then start from the beginning and listen to this episode again.
Right.
But is there anything else that you think people should know about that maybe I didn't ask yet when it comes to Pinterest?
I would say really the stumbling block, the mindset issue that I run into all the time with people is they think they have to do a lot on Pinterest and they think there's some magic number. They let the overwhelm keep them from getting started. Mm-hmm. There is no magic number of how many times you should pin per day. There's no magic Canva template for your pin graphics. Start small. Get your system going, get your plan going, look at the data first and build from there. Like I said, consistency is really the most important piece. So don't be the person that's like, yes, I'm all in, and you pin 15 times a day for a month. And then because you haven't really integrated that system into your business, you burn out and you drop the ball. That's not what we want to do. If you pin once a day for the next month, and hopefully you're using a scheduler like Tailwind so that you don't have to actually go into Pinterest once a day, that's going to get you started and get you comfortable as you continue to learn and build that system into your business.
That's so good. I love that. I love it when we have people on that are not like, you have to go balls to the walls right away, or yes.
That's how you fail. I agree. We've all done that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Well, Cara, if people want more Pinterest resources or want, more support with Pinterest, how can they find out more about you and learn from you?
Yeah. So I have a fantastic free training that is at carachace.com/free. And it's CARACHACE. I always have to spell it for people. .com/free. And you just get immediate access. It is about an hour-long presentation, and it goes into the 3 phases that I teach, which is optimize, batch, and scale. So you're going to get a lot more clarity on how to do it and why from watching that training.
I love it. And we'll link all of this stuff up in the show notes. So you can head on over to thefirstclick.net/podcast to check that out, to get all the links to find Cara everywhere. And all the resources we kind of talked about today. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So I was loving this conversation. I even learned a few things from her, and Pinterest has been on my mind for a while. So I'm going to start to jump back in and create new pins and get my content out there as well. So I'll be doing it right alongside you. If you have any questions or want some support, come on over to our Facebook community at facebook.com/groups/thefirstclick. Come join us there. I'll share my Pinterest journey with you, and we can collaborate together. All of the resources that Cara talked about are going to be available in the show notes at thefirstclick.net/podcast. So definitely check that out. And I hope that you add Pinterest to your strategy. This was such a fun episode to do. And I love talking about ways that we can take content we already have and use it and use it and use it and use it and still get great results. So I thank you for listening to this episode. Please make sure you subscribe wherever you listen so that you don't miss out on a single one. And, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a little review over on Apple Podcasts, that would be great. We'll see you in the next one.